Think all nuts are healthy? If you're over 65, the truth might surprise you, and your heart, brain, and bones are counting on it. Brazil nuts, thyroid guardian, and brain booster. Let's start with Brazil nuts. These were a complete surprise to me. I'd seen them in mixed nuts, usually those big heavy ones no one ever grabs first. But here's the deal. Brazil nuts are nutritional gold for seniors. Just one Brazil nut gives you around 96 micrograms of selenium, which is more than 130% of your daily requirement. Now, why does that matter? Because selenium is essential for thyroid hormone activation, and thyroid issues often creep up on us with age, fatigue, sluggish metabolism, mood dips, all things we sometimes chalk up to just getting older. But what if it's not age? What if it's an underperforming thyroid that needs a boost? Brazil nuts do more than just rev up your thyroid. They help protect your myelin sheath, the coating around your nerves that tends to wear down with age. That coating is crucial for keeping your reflexes, coordination, and memory sharp. And yes, there's more. Studies suggest selenium might help slow telomere shortening, which is one of the primary biological markers of aging. Pretty wild, right? I keep my Brazil nuts in the fridge to preserve the oils and always go for the unshelled kind. They stay fresher longer, but be careful. Too much selenium can actually be harmful. 1 or 2 nuts per day is plenty. No need to overdo it. Pistachios, the pressure-relieving powerhouse. Next up, pistachios. Now, if Brazil nuts are the heavy hitters of mineral power, pistachios are the cool, balanced Zen warriors. These little green gems are loaded with potassium, about 285 milligrams per ounce. That's a game changer for people like me trying to keep blood pressure in check. Our kidneys tend to slow down as we age, and that means sodium gets retained more easily. More sodium means higher blood pressure. But potassium helps flush sodium out and relax blood vessel walls. In fact, some studies say pistachios can lower systolic blood pressure by 3 to 5 points. That's the same drop you'd expect from certain prescription medications, but without side effects. They're also high in lutein and zeaxanthin, which protect your eyes from age-related macular degeneration, the #1 cause of vision loss in people over 60. Honestly, they're one of the most underrated superfoods for seniors. Plus, if you buy them in shell, you naturally slow down your snacking and give your brain time to realize you're full. That's great for portion control and mindful eating. I go for about 49 pistachios a day, or roughly 1 ounce. That's enough to get the benefits without going overboard on calories. Walnuts, the brain's best friend. I'll admit it, walnuts are one of those foods I used to avoid because of their slightly bitter taste. But now that I know what they can do for my brain, I've come to appreciate them in a whole new way. First off, just look at a walnut. It looks like a brain, doesn't it? And it turns out that resemblance is more than a coincidence. It's almost like nature was giving us a hint. Walnuts are the top source of alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, among commonly eaten nuts. ALA is a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid, and if you're over 65 like I am, you've probably heard how vital omega-3s are for keeping your brain cells sharp and communicative. What I didn't know until recently is that ALA helps maintain the structure of brain cell membranes, which is critical as we age and lose neural plasticity. Seniors who consumed 1.5 ounces of walnuts daily for just 8 weeks showed measurable improvements in cognitive speed and flexibility. That's not just theory, it's been demonstrated in clinical trials. And when you're juggling memory slips or mental fog, every bit of support matters. But what makes walnuts really extraordinary is their content of polyphenolic compounds. These are powerful antioxidants that actually cross the blood-brain barrier. That's rare. Most antioxidants work peripherally in the bloodstream, but walnuts' compounds go right into the brain and help reduce inflammation in neural tissue, which is a known driver of both Alzheimer's and dementia. I also found out walnuts are a natural source of melatonin. Our natural melatonin levels decline sharply with age, which is one reason why so many older folks struggle with falling or staying asleep. Eating a small amount of walnuts before bed may help gently restore sleep rhythms without needing pills. They also contain arginine, an amino acid that supports nitric oxide production, helping blood vessels stay flexible and responsive. That's good not just for the brain, but for your entire cardiovascular system. In fact, combining walnuts with blood pressure medications may actually enhance the effects by improving circulation naturally. Another detail that surprised me: walnuts may help reduce LDL cholesterol when consumed regularly, while also supporting HDL, the good cholesterol. That's a double win for heart and brain health. I keep my walnuts in the fridge to prevent their delicate oils from turning rancid. That's a common mistake. Storing them at room temperature can cause those healthy fats to oxidize, creating harmful compounds and a stale flavor. Now, about that bitterness, I used to see it as a flaw, but now I understand it's the flavonoids and tannins, natural antioxidants, doing their job. It's a sign that these nuts are biologically active. Once you realize that, you begin to appreciate their complex flavor rather than shy away from it. Some days I like to crack them by hand, just for the tactile satisfaction. It's a small way to stay engaged with my food, and it even helps maintain fine motor skills, which are easy to overlook, but important for overall neurological function. If I'm not snacking on them plain, I'll toss them into oatmeal, salads, or yogurt. They pair beautifully with fruit like apples or berries, both of which enhance their anti-inflammatory profile. And there's something about that satisfying crunch that really makes me feel like I'm giving my body something valuable, something functional, not just a snack, but neural nourishment. So now, 7 walnut halves a day, chilled and stored well, are part of my daily ritual. They're my go-to when I want something filling, brain protective, and honestly, comforting. We can't control everything when it comes to aging, but we can choose to feed our brains in a way that gives us the best chance to stay sharp, stay balanced, and stay independent. For me, walnuts are a non-negotiable part of that plan. Almonds, the bone-strengthening powerhouse. Now, onto almonds. If you're over 65, you've probably thought about bone density, especially if you've had a fall or know someone who has. Bones become porous and brittle as we age, and fractures can be devastating. Almonds are one of the best natural sources of calcium in the nut world, about 97 milligrams per quarter cup. But calcium alone isn't enough. Almonds also contain magnesium, and that's the real magic. Magnesium acts like a traffic director in your body, making sure that calcium goes where it's needed, into your bones, instead of building up in your arteries, where it can contribute to plaque and stiffness. That balance becomes incredibly important as our cardiovascular systems age. Almonds also help with constipation, thanks to their 3.5 grams of fiber per serving. And let's be honest, that's a struggle a lot of people our age quietly deal with. A regular intake of fiber doesn't just keep things moving. It supports gut health, which in turn impacts everything from mood to immunity. Let's not forget their powerful antioxidant profile. When you eat almonds with the skin on, you're getting flavonoids that work synergistically with vitamin E, essentially doubling the antioxidant effect. That's not marketing hype. Research from Tufts University actually found that this combo helps protect brain cells from oxidative damage, which is one of the main contributors to cognitive decline. Vitamin E is also important for skin health, and I've personally noticed my skin feeling less dry and dull since making almonds a daily habit. They may not turn back the clock, but they certainly slow it down in ways you can feel and sometimes even see. What I also like is how versatile almonds are. I toss them into oatmeal, slice them over salads, or grind them into a homemade almond butter. And if I'm in a rush, a small handful makes for a filling, blood sugar stabilizing snack that won't leave me crashing an hour later. There's also something satisfying about their crunch. It makes me chew more slowly, which helps with digestion and gives my body more time to register fullness. That's important, especially for those of us trying to avoid unintentional weight gain from mindless snacking. One thing I always recommend: go for dry roasted, unsalted almonds. A lot of the flavored ones are loaded with sodium, oils, or even sugar coatings that completely undo their health benefits. And if swallowing is a challenge, try slicing or lightly soaking them. Almonds are dense and dry, so choking can be a risk for people with dysphagia, or even just weaker chewing power. Almonds also contain small amounts of biotin, phosphorus, and manganese, micronutrients that support everything from nerve function to collagen production. It's one of those rare foods that's good for your bones, brain, digestion, and heart all in one handful. And unlike some other nuts, almonds are relatively stable. You can store them in a cool, dark pantry or fridge, and they'll stay fresh for a long time without going rancid. Great news if you're stocking up or watching your budget. I usually have 15 to 20 almonds a day, just enough to get their full benefit without overdoing the calories. They've become part of my routine, almost like a daily supplement, but one I actually look forward to eating. When I look back at all the small changes I've made over the years to feel better in my body, switching to almonds from processed snacks ranks pretty high. They're simple, natural, and incredibly effective for keeping my bones strong, gut balanced, and mind clear. Hazelnuts, the nervous system protector. While not mentioned as often, hazelnuts deserve a spot here. They're particularly rich in vitamin B6, which supports neurotransmitter function and helps maintain a healthy immune system. As someone who wants to stay mentally sharp and emotionally balanced as I age, that definitely caught my attention. B6 plays a crucial role in producing serotonin and dopamine, which means hazelnuts aren't just good for your brain, they may even help stabilize mood. I've found that on days when I feel more focused and calm, it's often after meals that include foods rich in B6. Coincidence? Maybe. But it's enough to keep hazelnuts in rotation. They also offer a good amount of folate, which is essential for DNA repair and cellular turnover, something that becomes increasingly important the older we get. Folate deficiency in seniors has been linked to memory issues and depression, so I keep an eye on it more closely than I used to. Hazelnuts are also high in manganese, a mineral that supports both bone health and antioxidant defense systems. Manganese helps enzymes neutralize free radicals, which means hazelnuts give your cells a fighting chance against age-related stress. And let's not forget the fats. Hazelnuts are a great source of monounsaturated fats, the kind that support heart health and reduce inflammation, without tipping into dangerous cholesterol territory. In fact, studies suggest these fats can help lower LDL, bad cholesterol, and may even raise HDL, good cholesterol. Their antioxidant profile includes vitamin E, proanthocyanidins, and quercetin, each of which contributes to long-term cellular protection. These compounds are particularly beneficial for brain aging, helping to combat oxidative stress that can impair memory and mental clarity. And let's be honest, they taste good. Hazelnuts are slightly sweeter and more delicate than almonds or walnuts. They almost feel like a dessert, which makes them a great alternative when I'm craving something indulgent, but want to avoid sugar. Because of their richness, I don't eat hazelnuts every day. But when I want to rotate flavors or simply break the monotony, a small handful once or twice a week is perfect. That variety keeps my snacking interesting and supports a broader nutrient intake. When I shop for them, I always look for raw or dry roasted hazelnuts with no added oils or salt. The flavored ones, especially those dipped in the chocolate or honey, completely undo the health benefits and add empty calories I don't need. Another thing I've noticed is that they're softer than almonds, which makes them easier on the teeth, an important factor if you have crowns, bridges, or just general sensitivity. They're a gentler nut to chew, but still satisfying. Sometimes I'll grind a few hazelnuts into my morning oatmeal, or mix them into plain yogurt with berries for a textured, antioxidant-rich breakfast. They also pair beautifully with dark leafy greens and salads, adding a sweet crunch without overpowering the other flavors. Their oil content is relatively stable compared to more delicate nuts like pine nuts, which means they're less likely to go rancid quickly. I still store them in the fridge though, just to preserve freshness for longer. For me, hazelnuts are one of those quiet performers. They're not flashy, they don't show up in the trendy superfood lists, but they deliver. And that's what I want. Real, balanced nutrition that fits naturally into a long-term lifestyle. Peanuts, inflammation and liver risk for seniors. Let's switch gears now and talk about the nuts you might want to toss out, or at least be extremely cautious about. Let's start with peanuts, which, by the way, aren't even true nuts. They're legumes, and that distinction really matters. Because they grow underground rather than on trees, peanuts are highly susceptible to mold contamination, especially from strains that produce aflatoxins, a class of naturally occurring toxins that are particularly dangerous for liver health. Aflatoxins are classified as Group 1 carcinogens by the World Health Organization, occurring toxins that are particularly dangerous for liver health. Aflatoxins are classified as Group 1 carcinogens by the World Health Organization. That means there's strong evidence they can cause cancer in humans. And when you're over 65, an age when your liver's detoxification capacity is already reduced, those aflatoxins don't just pass through quietly, they linger, accumulating damage. I was shocked to learn that long-term exposure to aflatoxins is linked not only to liver disease, but also to an increased risk of cognitive decline, likely because the liver's burden has ripple effects on brain health. And the scary part? You don't see or taste the contamination. Peanuts are also rich in omega-6 fatty acids, and while fats aren't inherently bad, balance is everything. When omega-6s greatly outnumber omega-3s in your diet, as they often do in the modern Western diet, it sets the stage for systemic inflammation. And inflammation, especially at low but chronic levels, is the quiet villain behind so many aging-related conditions. Joint pain, cardiovascular disease, cognitive fog, even autoimmune flare-ups. I used to eat peanut butter almost daily, thinking it was a good source of plant protein, but no one told me I might be fueling joint stiffness and low-grade fatigue in the process. Then there's the issue of vitamin K, which peanuts happen to contain in meaningful amounts. For younger people, that's not necessarily a concern. But if you're on warfarin or other blood thinners, vitamin K can alter how your medication works, potentially affecting clotting risk. It's not something many doctors think to mention during routine checkups, but it matters. On top of that, many commercial peanut butters, even the ones marketed as natural, contain hydrogenated oils, added sugars, and extra sodium. That combo isn't doing your arteries or your blood pressure any favors. I remember flipping over a jar and being stunned by how many unfamiliar additives were hiding in what I thought was a wholesome product. Peanuts also have a tendency to go rancid quickly, especially if they're stored in warm or humid environments. Once their oils oxidize, they form free radicals, which accelerate cellular aging and tissue damage, things our bodies can't afford when already managing age-related decline. Even dry roasted peanuts, which many people see as a cleaner choice, pose an issue. The high heat process used to roast them often produces acrylamides, chemical compounds that have been linked to neurotoxicity and memory impairment. That's particularly troubling if you're already trying to protect cognitive function. And let's not ignore the fact that peanuts are one of the most common choking hazards, especially for seniors with dry mouth, weakened chewing strength, or swallowing difficulties, issues that are far more prevalent than many like to admit. Even if you've been eating peanuts for years without obvious symptoms, it's worth reconsidering. Sometimes the effects are subtle and cumulative. More joint pain here, a little more sluggishness there. It's only when I switched to walnuts and almonds a few days a week that I realized how much lighter and more alert I felt. Now, I'm not saying you have to give them up cold turkey if they're your favorite, but cutting back or rotating in anti-inflammatory nuts can really change how you feel over time. It's one of those small shifts that delivers big returns, especially for longevity, brain clarity, and heart function. Cashews, the blood sugar spike. You didn't see coming. Cashews always seemed like a gentle nut to me, soft, sweet, creamy. But they come with a dark side, especially for older adults. Cashews are relatively high in carbohydrates for a nut, about 9 grams per ounce, and they cause a notable glycemic response. For someone with prediabetes, or diabetes, like nearly 50% of people over 65, this is a major concern. Cashews also contain oxalates, which can bind to calcium and reduce its absorption. Bad news if you're trying to protect your bones. Even worse, oxalates increase the risk of kidney stones, which become more common after 60. The nut also goes through intense processing to remove urusol, a toxic compound found in its raw shell. That processing strips away some of its beneficial nutrients and often adds extra oils and salt. For me, cashews were one of the first nuts I dropped completely. I now use walnuts or almonds in recipes where I would have previously added cashews. Macadamia nuts, calorie bomb and gallbladder trigger. Macadamia nuts, rich, buttery, delicious, and unfortunately, a real problem for aging bodies. They are the most calorie-dense nut available, at around 200 calories and 22 grams of fat per ounce. Now, fat isn't the enemy, but after 65, our metabolism slows and our gallbladder efficiency decreases. About 15% of seniors have asymptomatic gallstones, and macadamia's fat content can trigger uncomfortable episodes. Even worse, they're high in saturated fat, about 3 grams per ounce, which can contribute to elevated LDL cholesterol. And because they're often roasted in oil and salted, they can quickly go from indulgent to inflammatory. Macadamias also pose a choking hazard and are tough on older teeth, particularly for those with crowns, bridges, or weakened enamel. While delicious, they're now on my special occasion only list. And even then, I don't buy them anymore. But what really shifted my thinking was realizing how easy they are to overeat. Their creamy, melt-in-your-mouth texture makes them addictive. And before you know it, you've downed 300 or 400 calories without even realizing it. That kind of passive overeating adds up quickly, especially when maintaining a stable weight becomes harder every year. Even if you're eating well otherwise, throwing macadamias into the mix can offset your caloric balance fast. And unlike almonds or walnuts, macadamias offer very little fiber, which means they won't keep you full for long. You'll eat them, feel satisfied for a moment, and then be hungry again an hour later. Plus, they offer minimal omega-3s, which are crucial for brain and heart health, two things that really need support as we age. If I'm going to eat fat, I want it to come with benefits, not just calories. I also started thinking about cost. Macadamias are among the most expensive nuts you can buy, and often the cheaper versions are stored poorly, leading to rancid oils and oxidized fats, both of which can create harmful free radicals. There's something frustrating about spending a premium on a food that can quietly work against your goals. I'd rather spend that money on walnuts or pistachios, which do double duty as both tasty snacks and therapeutic nutrients. Some brands also coat macadamias in honey, chocolate, or artificial flavorings, which just layers on more sugar, additives, and unnecessary calories. It's a slippery slope from snack to sugar bomb. And here's something else I hadn't considered before. Macadamia nuts are incredibly low in essential minerals like magnesium and selenium. They simply don't offer much nutritionally compared to other tree nuts. They also don't contribute meaningfully to muscle preservation, something I've become more conscious of lately. Protein intake and lean muscle mass are key to preventing frailty in our later years, and macadamias don't help in that department. Another point Their density makes them difficult to chew thoroughly, increasing the risk of gastrointestinal discomfort, especially for anyone dealing with slowed digestion, reflux, or reduced saliva production. And let's be honest, after 65, every bite has to count. Macadamias might taste amazing, but they just don't offer enough in return. I'd rather enjoy something that leaves me feeling energized, not sluggish. So while they'll always remind me of island vacations and decadent desserts, I've learned that macadamias just don't fit into my everyday life anymore. When I want a treat, I reach for a square of dark chocolate and some almonds, still satisfying, but far more supportive of my long-term health. Pine nuts, medication disruptor, and appetite killer. Now let's talk about pine nuts, a deceptively small nut that carries surprisingly big risks, especially for seniors. These are sneaky, small, seemingly harmless, and often blended into things like pesto. But here's the kicker. They can interact with more than 60% of the medications commonly prescribed to seniors. Statins, antidepressants, blood pressure meds, you name it. If you're over 65 and taking daily prescriptions, there's a good chance these little seeds could be interfering with how your body processes those drugs. What really shocked me is how few doctors or pharmacists even mention this. Food-drug interactions aren't always front and center in consultations, but they matter, especially when your liver and kidneys aren't working as efficiently as they used to. For someone managing multiple prescriptions, pine nuts could be the hidden saboteur nobody talks about. They can also cause something called pine nut syndrome, a bizarre condition that leaves a metallic, bitter taste in your mouth, not just after you eat them, but for days or even weeks. I didn't believe it until I read the studies. One report found that 42% of people who developed pine nut syndrome lost weight unintentionally, simply because they couldn't stand the taste of food anymore. For older adults, where appetite and nutrition are already delicate balances, that's a serious concern. And let's talk about how unstable these things are. Pine nuts oxidize quickly, meaning they go rancid fast, especially when exposed to air, light, or warmth. Once those fats turn, they don't just taste bad. They produce pro-inflammatory compounds that stress your body at the cellular level. If you're already dealing with arthritis, chronic inflammation, or digestive sensitivity, oxidized pine nuts could make things worse. Another thing I've noticed is their slippery, smooth texture. That might seem like a minor point, but for anyone dealing with dry mouth from medications, swallowing difficulties, or even just reduced saliva production with age, pine nuts are a quiet aspiration risk. They're small, hard to chew, and easy to inhale accidentally. And it's not just your esophagus that has a tough time. Pine nuts also contain enzyme inhibitors, compounds that can block the digestion of proteins. That might not matter if you're 25 and your gut is in top form, but after 65. Most of us are already struggling with protein absorption. The last thing I want is a food that makes that job harder. The other issue that gets overlooked is taste alteration and appetite. Seniors are already vulnerable to losing their sense of taste and smell, whether from aging, medications, or illness. Add a metallic taste on top of that, and it's no wonder some older adults start skipping meals or limiting variety in their diet. Pine nuts can be a trigger for that spiral, even when eaten occasionally. They also come with a hefty calorie load, about 190 calories per ounce, which isn't terrible in isolation, but remember, these aren't nutrient-dense calories like you'd get from walnuts or almonds. You're not getting the same omega-3s, fiber, or cognitive support. Just high fats, some protein, and a whole lot of risk. And don't be fooled by their presence in pesto. Most people don't realize that even small amounts of pine nuts can set off these reactions. I've seen people assume that because they're mixed into a sauce or ground up, the risk disappears. It doesn't. The compounds that cause the issues are still there, just hidden under basil and garlic. These days, I skip pine nuts entirely, not even a pinch in pesto. If I want that creamy texture or nutty flavor, I use walnuts or sunflower seeds instead. They blend beautifully and come without the baggage. So yeah, they might look innocent. But for people like us, navigating medication regimens, slower digestion, and a greater sensitivity to nutrient balance, pine nuts just aren't worth the gamble. There are better choices out there that help rather than harm. Chestnuts, blood sugar instability, and nutritional weakness. Chestnuts are often seen as a festive or comforting food, roasted during holidays or included in stuffing recipes, but for seniors, they come with a set of nutritional drawbacks that are easy to overlook. Unlike most other nuts, chestnuts are very high in carbohydrates and low in fat and protein, which makes them nutritionally more similar to a starchy tuber than a healthy fat source. Just 1 ounce of chestnuts contains 15 grams of carbs compared to only 0.6 grams of fat and less than 1 gram of protein. This heavy carb load can cause rapid blood sugar spikes, especially for seniors who are diabetic or pre-diabetic, which, according to the CDC, accounts for more than 70% of Americans over 65. Beyond blood sugar instability, chestnuts lack the healthy fats and fat-soluble nutrients that make most tree nuts so beneficial for brain, heart, and joint health. They also provide very little fiber, which reduces their satiety value and digestive benefit, 2 important factors for older adults managing appetite and regularity. In addition, roasted chestnuts may contain acrylamides, especially when overcooked or charred. These compounds are associated with neurotoxicity and cognitive decline in high or sustained exposures, an especially troubling risk for older adults. Chestnuts also contain relatively low levels of essential minerals like magnesium, zinc, and selenium, all of which are critical in maintaining immune health, reducing inflammation, and supporting hormonal balance in aging bodies. When you compare them to almonds, walnuts, or Brazil nuts, they really fall short on just about every front. Another concern is how chestnuts break down in the body. Their starch-heavy composition means they behave more like bread or potatoes, spiking insulin and promoting fat storage, rather than providing long-lasting energy or cellular repair. And they're deceptively easy to overeat. Their soft, chewy texture and subtle sweetness make them feel light, but they can add up fast. That means not only are you loading up on carbs, but you're missing the proteins and fats that help balance blood sugar and reduce hunger. I used to love having a few roasted chestnuts on chilly evenings, especially during the holidays, but now I think twice. If I do indulge, I keep it to just 2 or 3, and only on rare occasions, not something I'd toss into a weekly snack rotation. It's also worth noting that commercially packaged chestnuts often contain preservatives or are pre-roasted with added oils and sugars. That just compounds the problem, introducing ingredients that can irritate digestion or trigger inflammation. 2 things no senior needs more of. When we're younger, our bodies have more room to handle these occasional indulgences, but as we age, the margin for error gets smaller. Even a small food choice can have big ripple effects on sleep, energy, blood sugar, and even cognitive clarity. If you're managing diabetes or weight issues, cutting chestnuts might be a simple and smart change. There are just far better options that give you more bang for your bite. Foods that nourish, not just comfort. I'm not saying chestnuts are evil, they're just not built for daily consumption in a senior's diet. And once you realize they're basically sweet starch with a nutty disguise, it becomes easier to make better choices. Subbing them out for pistachios or almonds gives you protein, good fats, and vital nutrients, all in the same snack-sized bite. So next time you're reaching for that bag of chestnuts, think about whether it's doing your body any real favors. Because at this stage in life, every snack matters. Every choice adds up. So there you have it, 10 nuts with 5 that support a long, vibrant life after 65, and 5 that could quietly work against your health goals. It's not just a matter of eating nuts or skipping them altogether. The real key lies in understanding which nuts nourish your body at this stage of life, and which ones may actually harm your brain, bones, heart, or digestion without you even realizing it. At our age, nutrition isn't just about calories or following a trend, it's about function. It's about choosing foods that actively protect your organs, regulate your metabolism, and preserve your independence. Once I made these simple changes in my daily nut choices, I started noticing real benefits. My sleep became more restful, my thinking sharpened. I even felt a little lighter and more energetic during my morning walks. These weren't overnight miracles, but small, steady improvements that added up over weeks and months. So if this gave you a new perspective on what's in your snack drawer, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, subscribe for more insights tailored to our stage of life, and share your thoughts in the comments. I want to know, which nut have you been relying on? And are you thinking of swapping it for something better now? Let's keep each other informed, inspired, and thriving, one smart choice at a time.